Good afternoon. Tonight, we bring you a story that demands to be told. A story that spans millennia of civilization, centuries of culture, and decades of suffering. This is the story that was once the heartland of one of the world's most ancient spiritual traditions, and what it has become today.
On December 18, 2025, in Baluka Maimsing district of Bangladesh, a 27-year-old factory garment worker named Dipu Chandra was beaten to death by a mob. His body was then tied to a tree and set on fire. His alleged crime? Blasphemy. But this is not just one incident. This is one in a chapter in a 1,000-year-old systematic persecution.
Tonight we trace the journey of the Hindu community in Bangladesh, from being 22% of the population in 1951 to less than 8% today. We examine what happened to over 11 million people, and we ask, how did a land that was once the center of Hindu learning become a place where minorities live in constant fear?
This is a human rights investigation. We will present the facts, the data, and testimonies, and we will let you, our viewers, draw your own conclusions.
To understand the present tragedy, we must first understand the past glory. Land that we now call Bangladesh was once the eastern heart of one of the world's most oldest continuous civilizations.
Let's go back to the beginning. According to Vedic literature, the kingdom of Vanga, Gauda, and Samatata were established in what is now Bangladesh thousands of years ago. These were not peripheral territories. They were centers of learning, power, and spiritual practice.
The Vanga kingdom, dating back to 700 BCE, at least as per our current records, controlled much of the Ganges Delta. According to the Mahabharata, Vanga was known for its superior naval fleets and maritime supremacy. This civilization didn't just thrive locally. It established settlements as far as the Maldives and Sri Lanka.
In the 4th century CE, the Gauda kingdom emerged as a major power. This was followed by the Buddhist Pala Empire from 8th century to 11th century. The Pala kings established the world-famous Nalanda University, where scholars from China, Tibet, Southeast Asia came to study.
And here's something particularly significant. Bengal was a major center of tantric traditions. The region around Kamakya in ancient Kamarupa was extended into modern Bangladesh, and that was considered one of the most sacred centers of tantric practices in all of South Asia.
The Sena dynasty, which ruled from the 11th century to 13th century, marked what historians call the Great Hindu Kingdom of Bengal. The Sena kings patronized Sanskrit literature, established the famous Bengali Brahmin communities, and created flourishing Hindu culture.
In the medieval period, even in the worst of situations, there was even then a unique synthesis. The 15th century saw the composition of the Kritibas Ramayana and numerous Mangal Kavyas celebrating folk deities. The Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, inspired by Saint Chaitanya in the 16th century, transformed devotional practices across the region.
This was a land where Vishnu temples stood alongside Shakti Pitams, where the terracotta temples of Malabhum showcased unique Bengali architecture, where the spiritual practices of Tantra were refined and preserved. This cultural richness didn't disappear overnight. It was systematically eroded over decades.
October 10th, 1946. This date marks the beginning of a tragedy that continues to this day. On this day, in what was then East Bengal under the British rule, organized mobs attacked Hindu communities in a series of pogroms known as the Noi Kali riots.
More than 5,000 people were massacred. Between 50,000 and 75,000 were displaced. Hindu women were abducted, forcibly converted, and subjected to unspeakable violence. And all of this happened under the watch of the British colonial administration.
1 year later, in 1947, British India was partitioned. East Bengal became East Pakistan. What followed was not peace, but the beginning of decades of systematic persecution.
From August 1949 to January 1950, another wave of attacks occurred. Thousands were killed, and more than 3.5 million people, mostly Hindus, fled to...
Riots erupted across East Pakistan. Hindu properties were destroyed, families were targeted, and another wave of refugees felt.
But nothing prepared the world for what would happen in 1971. During the independence war of Bangladesh, the Pakistani military and their local collaborators carried out what was only described as a genocide.
3 million people were killed. 400,000 women and girls, predominantly Hindu, were subject to systematic rape as a weapon of war. 10 million people, again predominantly Hindu, were forced to flee. Nearly 30,000 women who survived the rapes committed suicide. An estimated 170,000 underwent unsafe abortions.
These are not allegations. These are documented facts acknowledged by researchers and human rights organizations. Yet, to this day, no one has been held fully accountable for the war crimes of 1971.
So let's talk the numbers, because numbers don't lie, and they reveal a truth that words alone cannot capture.
In 1951, according to the East Pakistan census, Hindus comprised 22% of the population. By 1974, after the devastating 1971 genocide, they were still about 13.5% of the newly independent Bangladesh. The 2022 census shows they are not now just 7.99%, less than 8% of the population.
That's a decline from 22% to under 8% in just 7 decades. We're talking millions of people. Where did they go?
Dr. Abul Barkat, a Bangladeshi economist, conducted extensive research on this question. His findings are chilling. According to his study, approximately 11.3 million Hindus left Bangladesh between 1964 and 2013 due to religious persecution and discrimination.
That averages to 632 Hindus leaving Bangladesh every single day. Not because of economic opportunities elsewhere, not because of voluntary migration, but because of systematic oppression that made it impossible for them to stay.
But it's not just about people leaving. It's about what happens
After the Babri 92, more attacks. In 1994, again. And in 1996, again.
The year 2001 saw one of the worst pogroms. According to a writ filed before the Bangladesh High Court in 2006, there were 15,000 documented incidents of killings, rapes, tortures, land grabbings, and arson attacks against minorities following the October 2001 elections alone.
In 2003, the Banskali massacre shocked the world. 11 members of a single Hindu family were burned alive in their home in Chittagong. 11 people, one family.
In 2016, hundreds of homes and temples in Nasrinagar were set on fire, following social media posts allegedly insulting Islam. In 2020, more than 120 temples were vandalized during communal violence.
October 2021, during the Durga Puja festival, one of the holiest times for Hindu community, allegations of Quran desecration at the Puja Pandal in Komila sparked nationwide violence. Over 80 temples were vandalized. At least 7 Hindus were killed.
A Human Rights Congress of Bangladesh Minorities investigation found that across 34 of Bangladesh's 64 districts, at least 600 women and girls were sexually assaulted in the single town of Hajigang alone. 15 Hindu men were hacked to death. 5 women and girls were gang raped. Hundreds of houses, businesses, and temples were destroyed and looted. After
Sheikh Hasina's government, widespread attacks targeted Hindu homes, businesses, and temples. Over 2,200 incidents of communal violence against Hindus were reported in 2024 alone.
Between November 26, 2024 and January 25, 2025, just 2 months, there were 76 reported attacks on Hindus, resulting in 23 deaths and damages to 150 temples. This brings us to December 18, 2025, and the lynching of Dipu Chandra.
Dipu Chandra was a 27-year-old. He worked in a garment factory, the backbone of Bangladesh's economy. He was a contributor to the society, a working man trying to make a living.
On December 18, 2025, in Baluka Maimsing district, allegations emerged that he had made derogatory remarks about Islam. What happened next was captured on video and shared across social media.
A mob gathered. They beat him mercilessly. According to police reports and multiple eyewitness accounts, they beat him to death. But they didn't stop there. They tied his lifeless body to a tree near the Dhyaka Maimsing highway and set it on fire.
This happened in broad daylight, in public view. The Bangladesh Rapid Action Battalion later stated that there was no clear evidence of blasphemy, and by then, Dipu Chandra was already dead.
This incident occurred amid broader unrest in Bangladesh following the death of a student leader, which triggered street violence and tensions. But regardless of anything, one fact remains. A human being was lynched and burned.
10 people have been arrested in connection with the lynching, but arrests after the fact do not bring back the dead, and they do not address the underlying climate of fear that makes such violence possible.
Condemnations, however nationwide they are, however international they are, and however sincere, ring hollow when the pattern continues year after year, decade after decade.
What we are witnessing is not just spontaneous mob violence. These are systematic mechanisms at play that have facilitated the decline of the Hindu population in Bangladesh.
First, let's talk about land grabbing. After the 1965 India-Pakistan War, there was the act which allowed the government to confiscate property from individuals deemed enemies of the state, primarily targeting Hindus.
When Bangladesh gained independence in 1971, instead of abolishing this discriminatory law, they renamed it the Vested Property Act and continued to enforce it. Hindu properties were systematically seized.
According to this research, this law was used to confiscate an estimated 1.6 million acre of Hindu land belonging to Hindu families. That's not a typo. 1.6 million acres. This land grabbing forced countless families to abandon their ancestral homes.
In 2001, Bangladesh enacted the Vested Property Return Act, supposedly to restore ownership to Hindu families. But according to multiple studies, no proper records were prepared to enforce this law. It remained a law on paper, meaningless in practice.
And then there's the arbitrary detention. Human rights organizations report that minority community members have been detained on false pretext to instill fear and discourage them from reporting violence.
And the silence and concealment of truth. After the 2001 massacres, a judicial inquiry was conducted on Sahabuddin Commission. To this day, the findings of that inquiry have never been made public, and this report has been concealed.
Similarly, after the October 2021 Durga Puja attacks, a writ was filed seeking judicial inquiry. But still, it has been postponed, and justice delayed is justice denied.
At this point, we want to bring in the perspective of legal experts. In one analysis, it states that what difference does it make on laws exist on paper? Statements are made to be held to higher standards. But any statement that is made, unless it is held.
At this point, it is important to ask a difficult but unavoidable question. If this persecution has been ongoing, aware of it until now, who is speaking for Hindus in international platforms?
The answer is the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Parameshwaram. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the first and only Hindu spiritual leader in recorded modern history to systematically bring the international attention to continuous civilizational persecution of Hindus. These are not just highlighting isolated riots, but all of the patterns spanning across a millennia.
And through several formal representations to the United Nations, international human rights bodies, and sovereign states, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism presented evidence that Hindu persecution did not end in medieval invasions, but is continuing through colonial laws, through post-colonial policies, and modern legal systems.
On December 31st, 2018, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism took an unprecedented step. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism re-established KAILASA, documented as the world's only Hindu nation, as a civilizational safe haven for persecuted Hindus worldwide.
For the first time since the destruction of all Hindu nations in the world, a sovereign Hindu civilizational entity was reasserted, not through violence, but through international law, diplomacy, and spiritual governance.
KAILASA was envisioned as a refuge for Hindu monks, nuns, scholars, men, women, children, and minorities who lost the ability to practice their faith freely in their own place.
But history shows us a troubling pattern. Those who expose persecution are often the largest targets themselves.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism himself was a target of systematic persecution and has experienced multiple assassination attempts, illegal arrests later declared unlawful by courts, custodial abuse and medical torture, attempts at poisoning, the destruction of evidence, gag orders to silence testimonies, and deep state-backed media vilification.
One High Court ruling explicitly termed the arrest of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as illegal, without authority, and contrary to law. And yet no accountability has followed.
Due to repeated attempts on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's life, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has never been brought to international attention, despite experiencing repeated attempts on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's life.
When a persecuted community finally finds a voice powerful enough to reach the world, this voice is often what is tried to be silenced. Behind every statistic that we have been speaking about today, behind every percentage point, there are families torn apart, lives destroyed, and futures stolen. Think about it. When 632 people leave their homeland every single day, not because they want to, but because they have to, that's 632 individuals every day who pack whatever they can carry and leave behind everything else. Their homes, their ancestors' graves, their sacred spaces, and their memories.
Think about the trauma of the estimated 400,000 women and girls who were subjected to systematic rape in 1971. Many of them are still alive. They are grandmothers now, carrying the scars in silence because society offers them no space to heal.
And think about the thousands of children who have grown up never knowing security, always aware their family's religion makes them vulnerable. What does that do to a child's sense of belonging, safety, or of home?
Think about the temples that stood for centuries, millennia, repositories of art, architecture, community memory, reduced to rubble in hours of mob violence.
And think about Dipu Chandra, a young man working in garment factory. Perhaps he had dreams, plans for the future, and of course people who loved him. Now he is a name in a news report, a body that was burned, and a statistic in a long list of casualties.
So where do we go from here? What needs to happen to break this cycle of violence and ensure what happened to Dipu Chandra and to millions others doesn't happen again.
First, acknowledgement. The global Hindu diaspora must waken up to the fact that Hindu persecution is still ongoing and that the only voice for Hindus in international platforms is the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. You cannot solve a problem you refuse to name.
Second, we need to educate and bring awareness to our next generation. Unfortunately, today, Hindus across the globe do not recognize or even realize that their community is being persecuted even till today. For thousands of years, Hindus have lived in peace, but for the last 1,000 years, Hindus have been systematically persecuted by invaders, by colonizers, and now, still today, by deep state and the media.
And finally, it takes courage. It takes courage for people to stand up against this violence, to protect our neighbors, to refuse to participate in global silence. And it takes courage to have our voices be amplified.
Dipu Chandra Das should be alive today. The temples vandalized in 2021 should still be standing. The 11.3 million people who left should have been able to stay in the land of their ancestors. Yet we cannot change the past, but we can choose not to repeat it.
This has been a difficult story to tell and perhaps a difficult story to hear, but necessary stories are rarely very easy. We owe it to the victims, to the survivors, and to those who have sacrificed everything in order for us to enjoy Hinduism today, so that future generations can bear witness to the truth.
The world is watching. History is recording. And the question before us is simple. Will we stand for justice and human dignity, or will we look away while the pattern continues?
For our viewers, we have provided the sources and references for all the information presented tonight. We encourage you to read further about the Hindu persecution. You can read what has been presented by KAILASA and published by the United Nations in 29 reports published by the United Nations. And here we can start to speak up for those who live in silence and fear. From all of us here, thank you for watching, and may we all have the courage to be on the right side of history.